This is the Spirit and Wellness Show. News and information from a higher perspective. With your host, Harry Wilkinson.
Yes, hello. Welcome to the Spirit and Wellness Show. I am your host, Harry Wilkinson, and this is the show where we take a look at the days and weeks events, happenings in the world, politics, technology, education, anything that might be in the news, anything we're interacting with, and any particular topics of mutual concern or interest, and we take a step back from them. Actually, we take a step back and we look at them from a higher perspective. A higher perspective is, in my terminology, the ability to transcend what might be considered the normal push and pull, the normal reactions to perhaps news stories of the day, whatever you're interacting with on your social media, if that's your platform, or via traditional media, even just the radio in your car as you're driving to work. We are often inundated with information that much of which is either meant to titillate, perhaps confuse, or just simply keep you watching or in a state of anxiousness, if you will. And that is simply because that is how media makes its money. That is how media keeps people involved and coming back. And for those of us who seek a more spiritual approach to life, I know many people have said to me over the years that they disconnect from, all kinds of media and television and all of that kind of thing. Some people don't even have a television in their home. And that's good if you can live that way. That's wonderful. I'm not sure most people can. Unless you are willing to live on a mountaintop somewhere, you're going to have to interact in one way or another with the kinds of media that surround us every day. And that doesn't have to be a negative thing. And that's what my approach here is. To go into a story that may be upsetting, or a situation that you may find scary or unsettling, and to look at it from the point of view that this is an illusion, if you will, and not just an illusion, a creation, a very complex creation, created by none other than you, but you at a different level. You at the highest level of your being. You as part of what I like to refer to as divine mind, or at your metaphysical highest level. And that you create from this vantage point everything that you experience. And you do so for a reason, and you do it to experience things that help you to grow and expand and become more of who you really are, and more aware of that in your day-to-day earthly life. That, in a nutshell, is my belief and my approach. There's nothing new in that. It's a centuries-old mystical perspective, if you will, and there are other people besides myself who talk about that, and it just is how I focus. It's how I deal with everything around me, and I like to share it with others, and by doing this radio show, it helps me to keep things in perspective. So that is my deal, if you will. This is not a religious program, though we do talk about religion, every kind of religion, and how it fits into our world, the influences it has, good and bad. We talk about atheism and agnosticism too. All of those are different forms of religion. My strong mantra, and I believe that it needs to be stronger actually these days, is that spirituality and religion are two entirely different, separate things. And quite often they not only aren't the same thing, they work at cross purposes. My contention is that we are all spiritual beings, and we all have a sense of spirituality built into us. That is just the same as any one of our other senses, such as touch or taste or smell. And that's backed, by the way, by science, which has isolated the gene that they believe indicates spiritual or transcendent thought and awareness. It's the VMAT2 gene, and there have been many experiments and more experiments to come on this gene and how it works in helping people who have a mystical or transcendent experiences. It's fascinating. We've talked about it. We'll talk more about that on another show. But today's show is going to focus on a topic that is perhaps a little less science-y, or maybe even less woo-woo, if you will, and a bit more down to earth, and in fact a bit more grave, if you will, serious, if you will. To be or not to be is the title of our show today. And if you recognize those words, they are from the famous Hamlet soliloquy by Shakespeare. This is the moment in Hamlet when he looks at his world around and he asks what appears to be an age-old question: to be or not to be? That is the question. Whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of troubles and by opposing end them. To die, to sleep no more, and by a sleep to say we end the heartache and the 1,000 natural shocks that flesh is heir to. 'Tis a consummation devoutly to be wished for. To die, to sleep perchance to dream. Aye, there's the rub. For in that sleep of death what dreams may come, when we have shuffled off this mortal coil, must give us pause. There's the respect that makes calamity of so long life. I will spare you the whole thing. However, it's an oft-quoted soliloquy, but many people who quote it don't exactly know what it means or what Hamlet is talking about. This is the monologue in which Hamlet is contemplating suicide. He's weighing the pros and the cons of doing away with himself. Whether it would be nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of troubles, and by opposing, end them. By opposing, taking arms against your life and taking your life, and that opposition ends your troubles. That's what he's talking about. To end the heartache and thousand natural shocks that flesh is heir to. To die, to sleep perchance to dream. So his view of death is a long, long sleep. And in that sleep, he asks, what dreams may come? What would that be like? And that gives him pause. And just spoiler alert, if you've never seen or read Hamlet, he doesn't do it. Okay. But I felt it was a good place to start to talk about something that's very serious, which is suicide. And I do this because suicide has been much in the news lately. There have been 2 high-profile suicides, and I have to confess that the first one, I am not familiar with this person, but she apparently has quite a following in the fashion world, a woman by the name of Kate Spade. As I said, I am not familiar with her or her work, but on Tuesday of last week, she apparently committed suicide in her apartment by hanging. And shortly after that, another public figure that I do know and that I had heard of by the name of Anthony Bourdain, a famous television chef and travel host on CNN, he also committed suicide, also apparently by hanging. And that follows a CDC report that came out recently, showing that the suicide rates have gone up more than 30% in half of states since 1999. So I felt it was something that's important to talk about. You know, we can probably never know why people make a decision like that. But what we can think about is what does that decision entail? Does it indeed solve anything? Does it indeed save us from the heartache and the thousand natural shocks that flesh is heir to? Does it end our sea of troubles? As Hamlet says. And do we have a right to do so? Do we have a right to take our own lives? There are actual laws against, in some states, there are actual laws against committing suicide. I'm not sure how that works exactly,